people?
Good.
Fantastic. All right, thank you. All right, so I've got some questions for Samantha Bing in relation to the legislation relating to the confidentiality and privacy of those giving evidence to the Violence, Abuse, Neglect and Exploitation Royal Commission.
Good morning, Senator.
Morning. All right, so I've got to say there's been a bit of movement in this space since we last had the opportunity to talk, and it was my intention to go straight to the movement that we've had in relation to the bill that the government has introduced, ostensibly to address some of these concerns. However, in preparing to do that, while flicking back through the questions on notice that have come from the department and the government, noticed that it has been about a year since we started this formal questioning process. I think your first set of questions on notice came back to us from the estimates in March of last year. And it caused me to reflect upon what has been a very lengthy process in the advocacy around this piece of legislation. I think the Assistant Minister is aware that this has been, and you would be aware too, about an 18-month process, beginning with formal flagging of this issue in November of 2019, formal letters being written to the government by the Chair of the Royal Commission as of February of 2020, and then subsequent letters from peak disability advocacy organisations, letters from myself in subsequent estimate sessions, all really speaking to a building frustration on behalf of a community that, having made the often very difficult decision to tell our stories to this historic investigation, then have had to hold off for nearly 2 years now while we have waited for Christian Porter and for Attorney General Porter and for the Morrison government generally to give us the protections we need to do that. And so before going to the legislation, I just need to return to an exchange we had which has been recorded in a question on notice, and I'll give you the number. It's LCC-BE 20-05.
BE 2005, is that the...
Yep, that's the one.
Thank you.
And you'll be able to see there that we were discussing the policy parameters that had been given in relation to the drafting of this legislation. And you'll be able to see that you said that you'd only received the authority, the policy approval, setting out the approval for what we can take forward in amendments very recently. This was in October of 2020, and you subsequently indicated that you had received them, you believed, on the 16th of October. Can you see that?
Yes, Senator.
Wonderful. And in a subsequent question, I then asked whether you were able to provide those policy parameters on notice, and the answer that came back to us at that time was that it was considered cabinet in confidence until the introduction of the bill. So my first question is, given that the bill has now been introduced, whether you'd now be able to provide those policy parameters that you were given.
I'll just need to check that and take that on notice, Senator.
Okay, thank you. But we can establish reasonably now, given your answer subsequently, that it was the 16th of October when you got the policy parameters and were able to begin drafting the legislation.
On the 16th of October, Senator, I received the policy approval from the Prime Minister.
Right.
And that's a necessary step to commence work with the Office of Parliamentary Counsel on the drafting. Okay,
fantastic. And when then did the department formally hand over the drafted legislation to the Attorney General's office for approval.
Just one moment while I retrieve that detail. On the 9th of December, the department issued our drafting instructions to the Office of Parliamentary Counsel.
Right.
The draft bill itself obviously would not go to the Minister until after that drafting process is complete.
So 9th of December you sent it to, sorry, which body was that?
Drafting instructions were issued to the Office of Parliamentary Counsel.
Yep. And then from there it went to the Attorney General.
It came back to the department for consideration.
Right. So when did it come? So it came back to the department on the 9th or after?
The first draft of the bill was provided to the department on the 15th of February 2021.
Ooh, okay. What accounts for the gap in time between 9th of December and 15th of February?
I don't have any advice for you on that, Senator.
Okay. So it came back to the department on the 15th of February 2021. And then when did it go from the department onto the Attorney General's desk? You know, when did he get to actually formally sign off on it?
On the 4th of March 2021.
Right. And then it went through, subsequently, after his sign-off, the process is then to take it to Cabinet, yeah, for approval?
Goes through a legislative approval process, Senator.
That's a governmental process,
Yes,
isn't
governmental
it?
process.
Okay, well, I'll switch to the Assistant Attorney General then. So that went through your... When did you commence taking that through your legislative approval process?
I'll take that on notice. I can tell you that it was introduced on the 17th of March, but in the time between the dates that Ms Bing has provided and that date, I would need to get some advice.
Well, are you able to tell us which cabinet meeting signed off on the legislation?
I'll take that on notice.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else that, I mean, because right now this conversation that we're having is being, beamed live to the community, and I think that there would be some reasonably significant concern given that in answer to your question on notice, the question on notice I submitted in March of last year, that the government was considering it carefully, and that we now see that it really didn't get to the final phase until a year later of a 3-year Royal Commission. Is there any explanation or additional evidence that you can give to explain to the community why it has taken this long to produce what ended up being a rather short piece of legislation?
Sure, I can give you some additional information in that vein. The first thing I'd say is that a short bill doesn't necessarily mean that it is not requiring a lot of work. I think it's Mark Twain who said it often takes longer to write a short letter than a long one. But it's also, I think, important to say for those listening in that these amendments come on top of a number of existing ways that the Commission has to protect individuals' information, evidence and identities. So they can already use private sessions, pseudonyms and the making of do not publish orders. So those are there, but it's important, of course, that we put in place this additional protection. I think you and I are on the same page, broadly speaking, about that, Senator Steele-John. We've taken the time necessary to carefully develop this bill to make sure that it comprehensively protects and effectively protects the necessary information. It has been the subject of consultation with the Royal Commission itself to make sure that it is doing the things that it needs to, and that's to ensure that the amendments align with the processes and will, in their practical experience, have the desired effect of encouraging people with disabilities to come forward. So that's a process that does take time, and I'm pleased to see that it has reached the point where it's ready to go before the Parliament now.
Time's ever needed. last question.
I'll have to. Well, then I'll have to go back round again, Chair, because I've got quite a few more.
All right, Senator Steele-John, your time is up for this block. I will now hand over to Senator Dodson.